we're teaching English vocabulary, I think it's important that we're able to identify the different parts of speech of the words that we're teaching. This will help students to select the correct word, to fit it into sentences in a way that fits. So I'm talking here particularly about nouns, adjectives, verbs and adverbs. These are the most common and the basic parts of speech that you will be teaching in your vocabulary and reading lessons. It's also useful knowledge for when you're correcting students' work. Students will often make mistakes with parts of speech, mixing up, for example, adjectives and nouns. So it's important as a good, successful ESL teacher to be able to identify these different parts of speech. And knowing what they are can also be useful in particular strategies. So we'll talk about some of that also in this part of the seminar. Talking about the parts of speech, firstly nouns, just to check that we know what we're talking about. Nouns, well, they can be a person, a place, a thing, a thought, an idea. You can have concrete nouns, things like furniture, chair, bed, closet, door, a book, pen. These are what I think of as concrete nouns, things that you can actually show and touch, and they can be very useful when you're using realia. If you want to introduce the idea of a furniture, you can actually point out a piece of furniture to students, and that would be an example of a noun. You also have abstract nouns, things that you cannot touch, things that you cannot use as realia, like a book or a pen or a chair. And I'm talking about things like invention, creativity, decision. It's very difficult to show these as concrete objects because they're not things that we can hold in our hands. It's more an idea, a concept. So that's why we say it can be a person, place, thing, thought or idea, because that will include the idea of abstract nouns also. A useful technique to tell if something is a noun, and it doesn't always work, but it is a useful technique, is to ask yourself, can you put the word the in front of it? So we could say the pen, the book, but we cannot say, for example, the decide, because decide is a verb. You cannot say the decide. To make it into a noun, an abstract noun in this case, it would become the decision. Next we have adjectives, and adjectives describe nouns. They tell you more about nouns. So if you have the noun of a house, it could be a big house, a small house, an expensive house, a cheap house, a dilapidated house, a luxurious house. These are all examples of adjectives: big, small, luxurious, expensive, and they describe the noun. The other part of speech, the next part of speech, verbs, and they're typically described as doing words, action words, and that's correct. They can also be states, things like to be. To be is not really an action, it's more of a state. But generally they're words, doing words like to go, play, speak, talk, visit, investigate. And one of the useful ways to check if it's a verb is to ask yourself, can you put the word to in front of it? So we can say to decide, to speak, to go, to stop. But you can't say to decision. To go back to the earlier example, you would say to decide. And linked to verbs are adverbs. Adverbs describe the verb. They tell you more about the verb. Things like quickly, to walk quickly, to walk slowly, to speak loudly, to speak quietly. Many adverbs end in ly, not all of them do. Lovely, for example, is not an adverb, it's an adjective, but many of the adverbs do end in ly. Fast is an adverb, it doesn't end in ly, so a few perhaps which don't follow that rule, but generally they end in ly. Quickly, slowly, expensively, carefully. So these are adverbs. They tell you about the verb. They describe the verb. Now, I mentioned earlier abstract nouns. It can be quite difficult to get that idea across. However, a useful strategy that you may want to consider is using related parts of speech, related word forms. So you may, for example, explain to students the word create. Create means to make something, to put it together. So you might create an object or create an idea. That might help students because you could create a picture. You could show it coming into existence. You can actually act out or mime the creation of some object in class. That will give you access to related forms of the word. So from the verb to create, if we can show something being created in class, that will help you access the idea of creation, that this is my creation. So this is the object which has been created. Also, creator, that the creator is the person who creates something. So I am the creator, this is my creation, I have created it, to create. Also, where does the idea come from? It comes from my creativity. This is a quality I have inside me. Perhaps in my head somewhere I have this quality, perhaps related to other qualities such as imagination or intelligence, perhaps not. Then you may go for a related part of speech. What kind of a person am I if I can create things, if I can make things like this picture or this model? What type of person am I? Well, that will give you access to the adjective creative. I'm a creative person. So using these related parts of speech can be very useful for accessing abstract ideas, abstract nouns. Also, another way of thinking about these words and helping students to understand them is thinking about synonyms and antonyms. Synonyms just meaning words with similar meaning. Antonyms, words with opposite meaning. So students may not know a new word. For example, take the word sizable or massive. They might not know those words, but if you could explain to them using synonyms, they mean very big, large, massive. You can use synonyms to explain the meaning of new words in terms of words that they already know, often adding emphasis. So it's not only big, it's very big, it's massive, very big. They may not know the word minuscule, but you may tell them it means very small, very little. So that will help them to understand using synonyms. Or you may use opposites. They may not know the word let's think. They may not know the word uninspiring, but they may know the word inspiring, or something that gives you a new idea. Then you could teach the opposite, something that doesn't give you new ideas, something that stops you thinking, is uninspiring, something that closes down your creativity. They may not know the word cowardly, if someone is cowardly, but they may know the opposite of brave. So you may say it means you're not brave. You're not brave at all. A person who's not brave is perhaps a coward or a cowardly person. Or you may say it's somebody. They may not know the word mature, but you may say, well, it's the opposite of something very young, very new. You may give them examples. You could have a mature person, mature wine. It's not new. It's existed for a long time. Then you can concept check that. Is this something that was made yesterday? If it's mature wine, was it made yesterday? No. How old is it? How old do you think it is? Maybe several years old. So, using synonyms, antonyms, related parts of speech, really useful strategies, and I think these are techniques and strategies that all teachers of ESL can use and should use to the benefit of their students.